Damon Reed sat at the kitchen counter, sipping his morning coffee and scrolling through his emails when a notification buzzed on his phone. It was from the fitness tracker app he shared with his wife, Evelyn. They had set it up together a year ago, motivated to keep tabs on each other's activity and encourage healthier habits. Damon tapped the notification absent-mindedly, expecting to see Evelyn's usual stats: a solid number of steps, a quick jog around the park, or her typical yoga session. Instead, his brow furrowed as he read the data. Evelyn's tracker had logged her location in an unfamiliar area the previous night, miles away from their neighborhood. The app's GPS feature showed her at a residential address from 11:45 p.m. to 7 a.m. Damon stared at the screen, confusion turning to concern. Evelyn had told him she was meeting her friend Lila for dinner and planned to be home late, but this wasn't dinner. When Evelyn walked through the door moments later, she was dressed in her workout gear, her face flushed from a morning jog. She greeted Damon with a bright smile, dropping her keys on the counter. "Morning," she said cheerfully, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "Morning," Damon replied, his tone neutral as he set his phone down. "Good run?" "Yeah," Evelyn said, taking a long sip of water. "It's such a nice day out. Perfect for a quick jog." Damon studied her carefully, his mind racing. Should he confront her now? Her casual demeanor didn't give away anything unusual, but the data on his phone painted a different picture. "How was dinner with Lila last night?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Evelyn hesitated for a split second, barely noticeable, but Damon caught it. "It was good," she said quickly. "We ended up talking for hours. I didn't realize how late it was." Damon nodded, masking his unease. "Where'd you guys go?" "Oh, just that Italian place downtown," Evelyn replied, waving a hand. "Lila loves their tiramisu." Damon's chest tightened. He had been to that restaurant before. It was nowhere near the location her fitness tracker had logged. For the rest of the day, Damon couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his stomach. He replayed their conversation over and over, analyzing her every word and expression. The inconsistencies gnawed at him, and the GPS data loomed large in his mind. By evening, Damon's curiosity got the better of him. He opened his laptop and began searching the address logged on Evelyn's tracker. It didn't take long to find out who lived there: a man named Curtis Malone. The name wasn't familiar, but that didn't make it any less unsettling. Damon leaned back in his chair, his thoughts spiraling. Why would Evelyn be at another man's house overnight? Evelyn came into the room later, her expression warm. "Hey, are you okay? You've been quiet today." "Just tired," Damon said, forcing a smile. "Work's been crazy." Evelyn nodded sympathetically, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Well, let me know if you need anything, okay?" "Will do," Damon replied, his stomach churning as she left the room. As soon as she was gone, he pulled up the fitness tracker app again, staring at the logged location. The unanswered questions weighed heavily on him. Who is Curtis Malone? And what the hell was Evelyn doing there all night? The next morning, Damon's unease had transformed into determination. The name Curtis Malone kept bouncing around in his head, and he couldn't ignore the pit in his stomach. He needed answers, and Evelyn's cheerful but evasive demeanor wasn't helping. Evelyn had left early for work, giving Damon the space he needed to dig deeper. Sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, Damon typed Curtis Malone into a search engine. The results were surprisingly mundane at first: a LinkedIn profile, a few social media accounts, and some photos of a man in his late 30s with a neatly trimmed beard and an athletic build. What caught Damon's attention, however, was a photo on Curtis's Instagram. It was a group picture taken in a hiking trail, and Evelyn was in it. She stood next to Curtis, smiling brightly, her arm casually resting on his shoulder. The caption read, "Great weekend hike with the crew. Nothing beats fresh air and good company." The post was dated 2 months ago. Damon's heart raced as he stared at the photo. Evelyn had never mentioned a hiking trip, let alone one with a man like Curtis. Who was he to her? A coworker? A friend? Or something more? Opening her social media, Damon scrolled through Evelyn's recent posts. She had uploaded a few pictures from that same weekend. A scenic view, a selfie on the trail, and a group shot. Curtis wasn't in any of them. Convenient, Damon thought bitterly. Later that day, Damon decided to test Evelyn's story. When she returned home from work, he greeted her in the kitchen, his expression calm despite the storm brewing inside him. "How was your day?" she asked, setting her bag down. "Good," Damon said casually. "Hey, I was looking at our fitness tracker app earlier. It's kind of cool how it logs everything, right?" Evelyn's smile faltered for a brief moment, but she recovered quickly. "Yeah, I guess. Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason," Damon said, feigning nonchalance. "Just noticed it tracks location really well. I didn't realize it could pinpoint places so accurately." Evelyn nodded, her movements slightly more stiff than usual. "Yeah, it's a neat feature." Damon leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "By the way, do you know anyone named Curtis Malone?" The question hit its mark. Evelyn froze, her hand halfway to the fridge, her face paling. "Why are you asking about Curtis?" Damon's chest tightened. "So you do know him?" Evelyn turned to face him, her expression cautious. "Yes, I know Curtis. He's a friend from my running group." "Why?" Damon didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and opened the fitness tracker app, showing her the GPS log from the night she claimed to be at dinner with Lila. "Explain this." Evelyn's eyes widened as she stared at the screen. "Damon, I can. Don't lie to me," Damon said, his voice sharp. "You told me you were with Lila, but this says you spent the night at Curtis's house. So tell me the truth, Evelyn. What's going on?" Evelyn's hands trembled as she set her phone down on the counter. "Okay," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I wasn't with Lila. I was at Curtis's." Damon's heart sank. "Why?" "It's not what you think," Evelyn said quickly, tears welling in her eyes. "I swear, nothing happened. Curtis and I are just friends." "Friends?" Damon repeated bitterly. "You spent the night at another man's house and lied to me about it, and you expect me to believe you're just friends?" "I know it looks bad," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "But I was upset, Damon. You and I had been fighting, and I needed someone to talk to. Curtis offered to listen. That's all it was." Damon shook his head, his anger boiling over. "And you couldn't talk to me? Your husband? Instead, you run to him? Do you even hear how ridiculous that sounds?" Evelyn's tears spilled over as she sobbed. "I didn't want to fight with you anymore. I just needed a break, Damon. I didn't mean for it to turn into this. And yet, here we are," Damon said coldly. The argument ended with Evelyn retreating to their bedroom, leaving Damon alone in the kitchen. His mind raced as he tried to process what she had said. Was she telling the truth? Or was this just another lie to cover her tracks? That night, Damon lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't shake the image of Evelyn and Curtis on that hiking trail, her smile so bright, her arms so casually draped over his shoulder. The betrayal cut deep, and Damon wasn't sure if their marriage could survive it. The next morning, Damon made a decision. If Evelyn wasn't going to give him the full truth, he would find it himself. and that meant confronting Curtis. Damon parked his car outside Curtis Malone's house, his heart pounding as he gripped the steering wheel. He had spent the night replaying his argument with Evelyn, every word deepening his doubts. Her explanation had been vague at best, and her refusal to tell him the full truth left him with no choice. Curtis was the key to everything, and Damon wasn't leaving until he had answers. He stepped out of the car and walked up to the modest suburban home, his fists clenching and unclenching as he approached the door. The house looked ordinary, with a well-maintained lawn and a wreath hanging on the front door. It was almost laughable how something so normal could be tied to such a painful secret. Damon knocked, his chest tightening with every second that passed. The door opened, revealing Curtis. He was wearing a t-shirt and athletic shorts, a casual smile on his face, until he saw Damon. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of confusion and caution. "Can I help you?" Curtis asked, his voice measured. "Yeah," Damon said, his tone cold. "You can tell me why my wife spent the night here." Curtis blinked, his face paling slightly. Who are you?" "I'm Damon," he said sharply. "Evelyn's husband. You know, the woman you were just talking to last night?" Curtis's posture stiffened, and he glanced down the street, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. "Look, man, I think you've got the wrong idea. Cut the crap," Damon snapped, stepping closer. "She lied to me about where she was. Lied about being with you. So don't stand there and act like this is nothing." Curtis sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right. Come in. Let's talk." The inside of Curtis's house was as unassuming as the exterior. Minimalist decor, a neatly arranged living room, and a faint scent of fresh coffee. Damon sat on the edge of the couch, his eyes never leaving Curtis as the man perched on the armrest of a chair. "Start talking," Damon said, his voice low. Curtis nodded, his expression serious. "Evelyn and I met through the running group, like she told you. We started hanging out occasionally, group hikes, coffee after runs, that kind of thing. Nothing serious." Damon's jaw tightened. Hanging out occasionally doesn't explain why she spent the night here. Curtis hesitated, then sighed. "All right. Look, she was upset. She said you two had been fighting a lot, and that she didn't know how to talk to you about it. She showed up here late, and I let her in because I figured she needed a place to cool off." "Cool off?" Damon repeated bitterly. "And you thought that was your place? To step in and play counselor for my wife?" Curtis held up his hands defensively. "I wasn't trying to step on your toes, man. I didn't want to make things worse. I just listened. That's it. Just listened." Damon's voice rose. "Do you think I'm an idiot? She lied to me, Curtis. Lied about being here, lied about you. And now you're expecting me to believe nothing happened?" Curtis looked him in the eye, his expression firm. "Nothing physical happened. I swear. She slept on the couch, and we talked for a few hours. That's it." Damon studied Curtis's face, searching for any sign of dishonesty. He wanted to believe him, but the image of Evelyn and Curtis on that hiking trail, their easy camaraderie, the way she had draped her arm over his shoulder, flashed through his mind. "Why didn't she tell me about you before?" Damon asked. "If this was all so innocent, why keep it a secret?" Curtis hesitated. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe she was afraid you'd react like this." Damon let out a bitter laugh. "Of course. Blame me for her lies." "I'm not blaming anyone," Curtis said quickly. "I'm just saying she was in a bad place, and I didn't want to make it worse. That's all." Damon stood abruptly, his fists clenched. "Stay the hell away from my wife," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If I hear your name again, we won't be having a conversation next time." Curtis nodded, his expression serious. Understood. The drive home was a blur, Damon's thoughts racing as he tried to make sense of everything. Curtis's story aligned with what Evelyn had said, but that didn't make it easier to stomach. The betrayal wasn't just about what might have happened, it was about the lies, the secrecy, and the fact that Evelyn had turned to someone else instead of coming to him. When Damon walked through the door, Evelyn was waiting for him in the living room. She stood as he entered, her face pale, and her eyes red from crying. You went to see him, didn't you? She asked softly. I did, Damon said, his voice cold. Evelyn nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. What did he tell you? That you were upset. That you needed someone to talk to. That nothing physical happened, Damon replied, his tone bitter. The question is, why didn't you tell me any of this? I was scared, Evelyn whispered. Scared that you'd think the worst, that you wouldn't believe me. Damon shook his head, his anger bubbling over. You were scared because you knew what you were doing was wrong. You didn't come to me because you didn't want to face the consequences. Evelyn sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry, Damon. I know I messed up. I should have been honest with you. I didn't know how. The argument ended with Damon retreating to the guest room, leaving Evelyn alone in the living room. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on him, suffocating and relentless. As he lay awake that night, Damon knew one thing: their marriage would never be the same. The days that followed Damon's confrontation with Curtis were heavy with silence. Evelyn tried multiple times to approach him, but each attempt was met with cold indifference. Damon's mind raced constantly, replaying every lie, every excuse, and every tearful apology she had given. Despite Curtis's insistence that nothing physical had happened, the betrayal still stung. One evening, as Damon sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, Evelyn walked into the room. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands trembled as she held a mug of tea. Damon, she said softly, sitting on the armrest of a nearby chair. He didn't look at her. What? We can't keep going on like this, she said, her voice breaking. Please, we need to talk. Damon sighed, finally turning to face her. All right, he said, his tone sharp. Talk. Evelyn set the mug down and clasped her hands tightly. I know I've hurt you, Damon. I know I've broken your trust, and I hate myself for it. But I need you to understand. I wasn't trying to replace you. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Damon leaned forward, his expression cold. Then what were you doing? Because it sure as hell looks like you were more comfortable confiding in Curtis than in me. Evelyn's tears spilled over. I was lost, she admitted. You and we've been so distant lately. Every time I tried to talk to you, it felt like you were miles away. And then I met Curtis, and he listened. That's your excuse? Damon asked bitterly. I was distant, so you decided to spend the night at another man's house? No, Evelyn said quickly. It wasn't like that. I never meant for things to get so complicated. I needed someone to talk to, and I didn't think you'd understand. Damon stood abruptly, his fists clenched. You didn't think I'd understand? I'm your husband, Evelyn. It's my job to understand. But you didn't even give me the chance. You went behind my back and lied to me instead. Evelyn sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I know I made a mistake, Damon, but I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to hurt you. You keep saying that, Damon said coldly, but your actions say otherwise. The argument ended with Damon storming out of the house. He drove aimlessly for hours, the sound of Evelyn's sobs echoing in his mind. His anger burned hot, but underneath, how much trust is too much to lose in a relationship after betrayal? Write in the comments. It was a deep well of sadness, a grief for the relationship they had once shared. By the time he returned home, it was past midnight. The house was dark and quiet, and Evelyn's figure was curled up on the couch, her face streaked with dried tears. Damon stood in the doorway, torn between his anger and the faint flicker of compassion that still lingered in his heart. The next day, Damon made an appointment with a counselor. He wasn't sure if he was ready to forgive Evelyn, but he knew they couldn't move forward without help. "Evelyn," he said that evening as they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, "I booked a counseling session for both of us." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, hope flickered in her gaze. "You mean you're willing to try?" "I don't know," Damon admitted, "but we need to figure out if this is even salvageable. And I can't do that alone." Evelyn nodded quickly, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes, Damon. I promise." The first session was raw and uncomfortable. Damon laid bare his anger and hurt, while Evelyn admitted to her insecurities and guilt. The counselor guided them through the conversation, encouraging honesty while helping them navigate the minefield of emotions. "You're both here because, on some level, you want this to work," the counselor said gently. "But rebuilding trust will take time and effort from both of you." Damon nodded reluctantly. He wasn't sure if he wanted to rebuild their marriage, but he owed it to himself to try. As the sessions continued, small cracks of progress began to show. Evelyn cut all ties with Curtis, blocking his number and unfollowing him on social media. She became more open with Damon, sharing her thoughts and fears instead of hiding them. Damon, for his part, started to let go of some of his anger. It wasn't easy. Every time he thought about Evelyn's lies, the pain resurfaced. But he began to see glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with, and that gave him a sliver of hope. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Evelyn turned to Damon. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said softly, "but I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worth it." Damon stared at the horizon, his expression unreadable. "Forgiveness doesn't come easy, Evelyn," he said, "and I'm not sure if I'll ever fully trust you again. But for now, I'm willing to see where this goes." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. The weeks following their counseling sessions were fragile but filled with cautious hope. Evelyn worked tirelessly to rebuild the trust she had shattered. She went out of her way to be transparent, sharing her schedule, keeping her phone accessible, and ensuring Damon felt included in every aspect of her life. Damon, however, wasn't ready to let his guard down. He watched her actions closely, scrutinizing every word, every gesture, every reassurance. He wanted to believe her, but the scars of her betrayal ran deep, and each step forward felt like it came with an invisible tether pulling him back into doubt. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Evelyn reached over and took Damon's hand. "I know things aren't perfect," she said softly, her voice trembling, "but I just want to say thank you for giving me a chance to fix this." Damon glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm not doing this for you," he replied. "I'm doing this because I need to know if we can still have something worth saving." Evelyn nodded, her grip on his hand tightening. "I understand, and I'm not taking this for granted." Despite their progress, Damon still struggled with moments of doubt. One afternoon, while Evelyn was at work, he found himself opening her fitness tracker app again. The GPS feature had been a constant reminder of her lies, but today it showed nothing unusual, just her usual route to work and back. He closed the app with a sigh, feeling both relieved and frustrated. He hated that he had become someone who felt the need to check up on his wife, but the alternative, blind trust, felt impossible. Their next counseling session was a turning point. What do you think forgiveness looks like for you, Damon? The counselor asked, leaning forward with a kind but probing expression. Damon hesitated, his thoughts swirling. I think it means not letting what she did define our future. But that's easier said than done. The counselor nodded. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's about deciding to let go of the anger and pain so you can move forward together if that's what you both want. Evelyn looked at Damon, her eyes filled with tears. I want nothing more than to move forward with you, she said. But I know I have to earn that. Damon's chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, but the question lingered. Could he ever truly let go of the betrayal? As the weeks turned into months, the cracks in their relationship began to heal, albeit slowly. They found themselves laughing again, sharing moments of connection that had once felt impossible. Evelyn's efforts to rebuild Damon's trust were consistent, and for the first time in a long while, he started to feel like he could breathe. But even as things improved, Damon knew he needed to make a decision. Living in limbo wasn't sustainable, and their marriage couldn't survive indefinitely on uncertainty. One evening, Damon suggested they take a walk in the park where they had their first date. Evelyn agreed immediately, her face lighting up with cautious hope. As they strolled through the familiar paths, Damon finally spoke. I've been thinking a lot about us, he began. About everything that's happened and where we go from here. Evelyn nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I have too, she said softly. Damon stopped walking, turning to face her. I'm not going to lie. What you did hurt me in ways I didn't think were possible. And I've spent months trying to figure out if I could ever forgive you, or if I even wanted to try. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent, letting him speak. And the truth is, I don't know if I'll ever forget what happened, Damon admitted. But I also know that I still care about you. I still see the woman I fell in love with, even if she made mistakes. Evelyn's breath hitched. Damon, I'm willing to keep trying, he said, his voice steady. But it's going to take time, and I need you to understand that this isn't an easy fix. It's going to be hard work, for both of us. Evelyn nodded quickly, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes, she whispered. Thank you for giving me this chance. The weeks that followed felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Their relationship wasn't the same as it had been before. It was rawer, more vulnerable, but also more honest. They continued counseling, learning how to communicate better and rebuild their connection. Damon still had moments of doubt, but they became less frequent as time went on. And while forgiveness didn't come easily, he found that letting go of the anger brought him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the stars, Evelyn rested her head on Damon's shoulder. Do you think we'll be okay? She asked softly. Damon wrapped an arm around her, his gaze fixed on the sky. I think we're getting there, he said. Evelyn smiled through her tears, and for the first time in a long while, Damon felt a flicker of hope. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it wasn't over either. And for now, that was enough.